Usually when we talk about making a crucial decision, there is this baseline expectation of logic and precision.
Right. You expect a rational process.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you go to a medical clinic with a broken arm, the doctor looks at the x-ray, points to that jagged white line, and diagnoses the issue with absolute clarity.
Which is, what you want. You want a safe, predictable approach.
Right. Or, well, if you're a business owner hiring a new chief financial officer, you look at their resume. You run a background check. You look for a pristine record of ethical behavior.
Yeah, you hire the most qualified candidate. You want someone totally safe.
Spot on. But what if a CEO looked at a stack of resumes and, deliberately bypassed the Ivy League graduates with spotless records? What if they went down to the local penitentiary to hire the person who previously tried to burn the company to the ground?
I mean, you would call that CEO insane.
Yeah. It flies in the face of all rational thought. Yet, that is precisely the staggering historical and spiritual paradox we are looking at today. Welcome to Reformed Thinking, by the way.
Glad to be here for this one. It is going to be intense.
It really is. Today, we are taking a massive deep dive into a historical message by Charles Spurgeon. We are looking specifically at a text from Isaiah 66.21.
Right, which says, "And I will also take of them for priests and for Levites, saith the Lord."
Yeah, that is the one. Our mission today is to unpack how the most unlikely, unqualified, and frankly, openly rebellious individuals are frequently the ones handpicked by God for the highest spiritual duties.
It is a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. We have an immense amount of ground to cover.
Yeah.
We are looking at a scenario where the standard diagnostic tools of human qualification are completely thrown out the window, and, well, we need to figure out why.
It is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift. I mean, we are analyzing a system of selection that operates on a logic completely foreign to human resource departments or university admissions boards.
Oh, totally foreign.
Right. When we look at human institutions, the methodology for choosing leaders or representatives is universally based on merit or pedigree or clean record.
Yeah, demonstrated aptitude. You look for the brightest people.
Absolutely. The individuals who have shown a natural inclination toward virtue or leadership from their youth. But the historical text we are analyzing today forces you to confront a methodology that is the total opposite.
The total opposite.
Yeah. We are examining a divine strategy that deliberately bypasses the pristine and the qualified, opting instead for the broken, the hostile, and the disqualified.
And to grasp the sheer gravity of this, you have to understand the historical context surrounding the prophecy in Isaiah. The setting is one of absolute devastation and righteous judgment.
Yes, the context is incredibly brutal.
It really is. Spurgeon references the siege of Jerusalem by Titus. And, we need to pause here because this is not just a polite historical footnote.
Right, it is horrifying.
Yeah, this was one of the most chaotic, horrifying events in ancient history. You have the Roman army completely surrounding the city, cutting off all supplies.
The starvation inside the walls reached unimaginable levels.
It did. It drove people to absolute madness. But the detail that Spurgeon pulls out, quoting Josephus, who was an eyewitness to this siege, is chilling.
What did Josephus say?
He noted that there wanted room for crosses and crosses for bodies.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly dark.
It is pitch black. The Romans are crucifying up to 500 people in a single day. The hillsides around Jerusalem were just forests of wood and dying men.
500 a day.
Yeah, up to 500. They were running out of timber to build the crosses, and they were running out of physical ground to plant them in.
You try to picture that kind of horror, and it almost breaks your mind. It is a scene of total, unmitigated destruction falling upon a people.
It really is.
What's fascinating here is the historical correlation between this horrific event and a specific prior action. It is staggering.
Right, the prior action of the crowd.
Yes. Spurgeon points out that when the Messiah came to these people, he was not met with devout faith. He was met with a profane imprecation.
A curse.
Spot on. The crowd literally yelled, "His blood be on us and on our children." They invoked a curse upon their own heads, and that retribution was meted out in full measure.
Yeah, the siege of Titus was the historical realization of that curse.
Well, precisely. And the fallout from that event led to the scattering of these people across all lands. They were dispersed, finding no rest for the soles of their feet.
Living as outcasts and wanderers for generations.
Right. This is the definition of a people under severe righteous judgment. They are broken, scattered, and seemingly cast off forever because of their violent rejection of the truth. They had sinned themselves into an outlaw status.
But then right in the middle of this absolute devastation, the text pivots to a massive promise of restoration.
It is a massive pivot.
Yeah. God promises to bring them back to his holy mountain. And Spurgeon points out that this promise isn't restricted to just one group.
Right, it is much broader.
It applies equally to the Gentiles, the heathen nations who are completely outside the Old Covenant, and to the scattered Jews. In this spiritual reality, the distinction vanishes entirely.
There is neither Gentile nor Jew in this context.
Right. The promise stands good to the whole human race, considered in its fallen state. But wait, I have to push back on this logic.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, if the devastation was so absolute, if the judgment was so thorough, how does a promise of elevating these very same scattered, broken people to elite status even compute?
It is a massive contradiction, humanly speaking.
Yeah. Think about a massive earthquake hitting a city. The buildings are completely leveled, everything is turned to dust and shattered concrete.
Total ruin.
Right. And then the master builder walks into the ruins and promises to use that specific shattered rubble to construct a flawless royal palace. It defies logic.
It does.
Why would you use the broken rubble instead of bringing in fresh, clean materials from outside the disaster zone?
That tension is the core focus of this entire deep dive. The builder refuses the clean materials and insists on the rubble.
Insists on it.
Yeah. God looks at the scattered, fallen human race, a people with a natural fitness for sin, and says, I will take of them for priests and for Levites. Wow.
He is not looking for volunteers from an untainted populace. He is drafting from the ruins.
But before we can fully grasp the shock of who gets chosen, we first need to define what those titles actually mean.
Absolutely.
If God is taking people from this fallen human race to be priests and Levites, we need to understand the high privilege associated with those roles.
We do. Historically, when the firstborn were spared in Egypt during the final plague, God claimed all the firstborn as his peculiar property.
Right.
Instead of taking every firstborn across all the tribes, he took the tribe of Levi to represent them. They became his exclusive possession.
His distinct property.
Yeah. And within that tribe, the house of Aaron was chosen specifically to minister in the sanctuary. Their entire existence was separated from the normal activities of ancient life.
Right. Their daily routine was completely different from everyone else.
Totally different.
While the other tribes were out farming the land, raising crops, or trading in the marketplace, the Levites were living only for divine duties.
They were attending to the tabernacle. Yeah. The priests were in the courts, slaughtering bullocks and lambs, dealing with the blood and the sacrifices. It was an all-consuming vocation.
It was their entire life.
But we have to bring this into the present for you, the listener, because we are not talking about ancient animal rituals anymore.
Right. We are looking at the spiritual reality.
Spot on. Spurgeon translates this ancient role into a modern spiritual reality. Being a priest and a Levite today means being set apart as distinct property through three specific actions.
Let's break those down.
First, by election.
Yeah.
And we are not talking about a political vote. This means being chosen by God before time began, before you had done anything good or bad.
That is a massive concept on its own.
It is. Second, by redemption. This isn't a discount coupon. This means you were literally bought and paid for out of the slave market of sin.
A literal purchase.
Yeah. And third, by endowment. This means being regenerated and equipped by the Holy Spirit. You are given a new heart. So what does this all mean? If someone is walking around today possessing this new heart, what is their actual job description? What does a modern spiritual priest actually do?
Well, the modern job description for this royal priesthood breaks down into three core duties. The first duty is drawing near.
Drawing near.
Yeah. Under the old system, while the general population stood outside the temple, the high priest was permitted to go inside the veil into the most holy place.
Right, the restricted area.
Exactly, or rather, absolutely. Today, individuals who were once afar off, alienated and hostile in their minds, are brought incredibly near to the mercy seat by the blood of Christ.
That was beautiful.
They are given direct, intimate access to the creator of the universe. The second duty is intercession, which is acting toward God on behalf of men.
Pleading for others.
Right. This involves bringing acceptable prayer. Spurgeon mentions those who cry to God for Sodom, and yet more hopefully for Jerusalem. These are people who plead for the mercy of others, whose prayers have actual weight in the courts of heaven. The third duty is instruction, which is acting toward men on behalf of God.
Teaching.
Yeah. They act as ushers, tutors, and scribes. Spurgeon compares them to Ezra, who expounded the knotty points of the Old Covenant. They open up the truth for others to understand.
And I want to make sure we clarify a crucial distinction here.
What is that?
Spurgeon states that these individuals do not claim a role of absolving sinners. They don't walk around handing out pardons or pretending they can wipe away someone's guilt.
No, absolutely not.
They leave that strictly to Christ, who is the chief rabbi of the chosen seed. Their role is to act as instructors and intercessors.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they are pointing people to the one who can actually forgive while pleading with heaven for the souls of those around them.
Right. So we understand the job description now. It is highly exclusive, sacred, and incredibly demanding.
You have to draw near to a holy God, intercede for a dying world, and instruct people in the deepest truths of the universe.
Which makes the hiring process absolutely baffling. Because when we look at the astonishing fact of who God actually chooses to fill these roles, it contradicts every standard of human logic we possess.
The contrast with false priests throughout history provides a sharp relief to this point. History is full of individuals who assumed religious roles through human selection or natural inclination, but who were entirely devoid of divine appointment.
Yeah, people who just appointed themselves.
Think about the sons of Korah in the days of Aaron. These were men of the tribe of Levi who gathered together and said, "Ye take too much upon you."
Right, they challenged the appointed leaders.
They looked at Aaron and Moses and rebelled against God's appointed leadership, assuming they could just step into the priesthood based on their own ambition.
And what happened to them?
The earth literally opened her mouth and swallowed them up.
Just a terrifying outcome.
Yeah. Or consider the priests of Baal standing by their massive altar. They vastly outnumbered the opposition. They were the established religious class of their day.
But they were completely routed by Elias the nonconformist.
They were. And for the listener who might not be familiar with that title, Elias is the Greek form of Elijah.
Right, the prophet Elijah.
Spurgeon calls him a nonconformist because Elijah stood completely alone against the state-sponsored religion of his day on Mount Carmel.
Yeah, it was just him against hundreds of them.
The priests of Baal had the numbers, they had the political backing, but God had zero regard for their sacrifice.
You also have the men in the days of Christ. These were men instructed in the law, trained from childhood in the scriptures.
The religious elite?
Yeah, they looked the part, they sounded the part, they had all the credentials, and yet these were the very men who conspired to put Christ to death.
It is a stunning reversal.
It is. When given the choice by the Roman governor, they looked at the Son of God and chose Barabbas, a known murderer and insurrectionist, instead.
Human selection means absolutely nothing here.
Nothing at all. A parent bringing a child up in the system, or someone having a natural bent or talent for public speaking or religious administration, has zero bearing on this calling.
The quote from Isaiah is explicitly, "I will take of them." God's selection process is entirely his own.
Right, and when you look at the roster of unlikeliest candidates Spurgeon provides, it is mind-blowing.
It really is.
God deliberately chooses those with a natural fitness for sin and a suitability to go astray, and turns them into captains of the Lord's hosts.
Let us examine some of the historical examples provided in the source text. They are undeniable proof of this divine strategy.
Okay, let's hear them.
Let us examine John Newton. Here was a man who was once a blasphemer and injurious. He was deeply involved in the transatlantic slave trade, a profession built on human suffering and extreme cruelty.
A horrible way to live.
Truly, he was a man whose mouth was filled with cursing, living a life of utter moral degradation. Yet, God took him, broke his hard heart, and made him an earnest preacher and a sweet poet.
The very man who penned the words to Amazing Grace.
Yes, precisely. Then you have John Bunyan. Spurgeon describes him playing tip-cat on the village green on the Sabbath, full of a drunkard's vices.
Now, tip-cat was a rowdy, pub-style street game involving hitting a small piece of wood with a stick.
Right. The fact that he was playing this on the Sabbath, mixed with foul-mouthed profanity, shows where his priorities were.
Oh, absolutely. By all societal standards of the 17th century, he was a lost cause, a menace to his community.
Yet he was chosen, subdued, and became the author of The Pilgrim's Progress, a matchless allegory that has guided countless readers.
And it is not just the overtly profane either. Look at Martin Luther.
He was a completely different case.
He was. He wasn't a drunkard on the village green. He was diligent in ceremony. Spurgeon calls him a highly superstitious Romanist.
He was very intense about his religion.
Yeah, he was trying to earn his way to heaven through intense legalism, beating his own body, starving himself, trapped in a religious system of his own making, terrified of God's wrath.
He was the epitome of self-righteous striving.
Right, but God took him and turned him into a bold proclaimer of free grace. Or Augustine, a youth of corrupt propensities.
He lived a very wild life early on.
He brought endless grief to his mother Monica with his vicious lifestyle, his mistresses, and his philosophical wandering into cults.
And God raised him up to be one of the greatest theologians of the early church.
And, of course, the Apostle Paul. Spurgeon describes him like a huge wild beast, making havoc of the church, breathing out threatenings and slaughter.
He was actively hunting down Christians to kill them.
Suddenly, he is struck down on the road to Damascus and ordained to bear the name of Christ to the Gentiles. Here's what gets really interesting. If you think about it like a master artist.
Okay, an artist.
Usually, an artist wants the most pristine, expensive, flawless canvas available. If they're going to paint a masterpiece, they want a perfect surface.
That makes total sense.
But this master artist deliberately walks past all the clean canvases in the supply shop. He goes to the trash pile out back, pulls out cracked, mud-stained, ruined canvases, and uses them to display his greatest masterpieces.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of grace described in the text. God does not find a natural fitness in these individuals. He supplies the fitness.
He brings it all to the table.
Yes. He takes the unlikeliest materials so that the resulting masterpiece can only be attributed to the skill of the artist, not the quality of the canvas.
Right. If the canvas is flawless, the viewer might praise the canvas maker.
But if the canvas is literally garbage, the viewer can only stand in awe of the painter. Which brings us to the most vital part of this discussion.
The why behind all of this.
Yes. Why would the Almighty operate this way? If it defies all human logic, what is the divine logic behind it? Why bypass the naturally gifted, the clean, and the educated to elevate the worst offenders to the highest ranks?
Spurgeon outlines specific, calculated reasons behind this divine strategy.
He does.
And the first logic we see is the display of infinite mercy. The Apostle Paul himself recognized this. He wrote about his own life, marveling that the unsearchable riches of Christ were given to him, a man he called the chief of sinners.
It illustrates the high prerogative of sovereign grace.
Right. And I love the brilliant analogy Spurgeon uses here to explain this point. He talks about the prodigal son.
Oh, that is a great one.
Imagine that wild son coming back home after wasting his entire inheritance on riotous living, hanging out with prostitutes, ruining the family name.
He hits absolute rock bottom.
Yeah. The human father runs to him, embraces him, and completely forgives him. The forgiveness is absolute. The robe is put on his back, the ring on his finger.
Right, he was fully restored to the family.
But if that same father needed someone to go to the market the next day with a large bag of money to conduct business, he wouldn't trust the newly returned prodigal.
No sane person would.
Right. Human nature dictates that he would send the older, reliable son. He would say, I love you, you are forgiven, but I'm not handing you the treasury just yet. You need to earn my trust back.
That is just common sense.
Yeah. Yet, God operates entirely differently. He takes his highest treasure, the gospel itself, and entrusts it to the returning rebel.
That is stunning.
You have the impure teaching chastity. You have the Sabbath breaker, hallowing the Lord's day. God gives the commission to the very people who used to curse his name.
But doesn't this strategy seem incredibly risky? Why give the keys to the kingdom to former traitors? This raises an important question. How does God show his supreme strength?
Oh, that is a good question.
A human monarch might show strength by crushing a rebellion, lining the roads with the executed bodies of his enemies. God shows his might by taming his enemies.
By changing them.
Right. Spurgeon uses the analogy of a lion tamer. A skilled tamer delights in showing the audience how the wild beast obeys every single word without the use of a whip or an angry look.
Wow.
The tamer's strength is displayed in the willing submission of a creature that could otherwise tear him apart. In the spiritual realm, God subdues the heart of stone, replacing it with a heart of flesh.
Turning an enemy into a friend.
Yes, he turns a vehement, breathing-out slaughter enemy like Paul into a diligent, willing friend. He accomplishes this without physical coercion, demonstrating an internal regenerative might that alters the very desires of the individual.
That is such a vivid picture. The beast isn't locked in a cage. The beast is walking beside the tamer, completely docile and attentive, wanting to please the master.
Beautifully said.
But if someone hears this, they might object and say, well, if God is going to pick people, shouldn't the good, moral citizens have a right to be picked first?
That is a very common objection.
Right. That brings us to another reason Spurgeon highlights. The display of absolute sovereignty. God does this to prove that he rules the armies of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth without needing anyone's permission or adhering to human standards of fairness.
We have to wrap our minds around this concept.
Yeah. Spurgeon states that no man has any right to mercy. None.
Zero rights.
All human rights, in this specific context, are merged into the right to be condemned. We have sinned ourselves into outlaw status. The only thing we have earned is judgment.
Right.
So when God says, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, he is operating from a position of absolute, uncontested authority.
If mercy were owed to anyone based on their good behavior, it would no longer be mercy. It would be a debt. It would be a paycheck.
Right. You earned it.
Yeah, and that defeats the whole concept. By lifting the poor from the dunghill, by taking the most degraded individuals who've gone the farthest away, and setting them among princes, God forces the universe to acknowledge his sovereign will.
He proves he is the ruler.
Yes. He bypasses those who think they have a claim to his favor based on their own righteousness, proving that salvation and calling are entirely dependent on his good pleasure. He doesn't need safe bets. He doesn't need to check references.
Okay, but let's look at the practical result of this.
Yep.
If you hire a bunch of former rebels to be your instructors and intercessors, what kind of ministry do they actually produce?
That is a great angle.
Spurgeon argues that this strategy is designed to secure a loving, warm-hearted ministry. And this is where he gets incredibly practical and, frankly, a bit critical of the religious establishment of his day.
He was not afraid to critique his peers.
No, he was not. He contrasts this warm-hearted ministry with what he calls superficial preachers. These are people who only produce dainty essays or flowery sermons.
Dainty essays.
Yeah, they have a very polite academic religion. They string together nice vocabulary words, but they never talk about the extreme depravity of the human heart or the intense conflicts of the soul.
Why is that?
Because they haven't experienced it. They got their religion easily. They haven't known deep outward sin or the crushing weight of the law on their conscience.
Right, it is all theoretical to them.
But the man who has, as Spurgeon says, done business in deep waters, knows the absolute torture of his own crimes. He knows what it feels like to be drowning in guilt and despair, terrified of waking up in hell.
Because they have experienced the depths of that despair, they also know the staggering relief of pardon. They have a testimony born from inwrought experience.
They lived it.
They understand the mechanics of grace because they have been the direct beneficiaries of it. To illustrate this, Spurgeon uses the imagery of the brazen serpent in the wilderness.
Let's unpack that for the listener.
Sure. This is an Old Testament narrative from the book of Numbers. The Israelites were wandering in the desert and were attacked by highly venomous snakes as a judgment for their complaining.
People were dying in agony.
Yes. God instructed Moses to craft a bronze serpent and put it on a pole, promising that anyone who looked at it would live. Now, think about the psychological difference between two people looking at that bronze snake.
Okay, two different perspectives.
Right. One person is just a curious bystander. They were never bitten. They just think it's an interesting piece of metalwork. But the other person has felt the venom coursing through their veins.
They know they are dying.
Yes. They have felt the cold grip of death approaching, the paralysis setting in. When that bitten person looks at the cure and feels the life rushing back into their body, they look at it with a completely different intensity.
Oh, absolutely.
When these rescued individuals stand up to preach, they preach with fiery intensity because they remember the venom. They speak of grace because they required massive amounts of grace. They love much because they have had much forgiven. You cannot get a dainty essay out of a man who is rescued from the gallows.
You really can't. They're going to shout about the pardon because they literally felt the rope tightening around their neck.
Precisely.
They aren't discussing theological theories. They're discussing their own survival. And that emotional intensity leads into another massive tactical advantage.
What is that?
How does this strategy affect the broader spiritual war? Spurgeon argues that God does this to openly triumph over Satan. I absolutely relish this point.
It is a brilliant point.
Think about corporate espionage. There is nothing that makes a rival CEO gnash his teeth more than losing his best, highest-performing executives to the competition.
Oh, they hate it.
Imagine the adversary spending years cultivating a person, filling them with vice, training them in sophisticated arguments against the truth, getting them into pristine condition to do maximum mischief in the world.
A fully trained operative.
Yeah. And then the officer of divine grace steps in, arrests them, and changes their heart entirely. The very weapon forged against heaven is now turned back on the gates of hell.
The tactical brilliance here is unmatched. These former rebels know the ins and outs of the enemy's castle.
They know all the secrets.
Yes, They understand the devices, the psychological traps, and the tactics of the adversary because they used to employ them. They know where the walls are weak and how the enemy operates in the dark.
Right.
A polite, sheltered religious person might not know how to speak to a hardened criminal or a cynical intellectual. But a former criminal or a former cynic knows precisely how to dismantle those arguments.
Because they used to make those same arguments.
Right. As Spurgeon puts it, all heaven rings with rapture when a great sinner is saved, and all hell howls with dismay when an arch rebel bows down to kiss the feet of Christ.
Wow.
God secures a victory that publicly humiliates the forces of darkness by poaching their most elite soldiers and drafting them into his own priesthood. He doesn't just defeat the enemy, he uses the enemy's own troops to do it.
So understanding this this massive divine logic brings us directly to the practical application. We see who God chooses, and we see the intricate, multi-layered reasons behind his choices.
Yes, the why is established.
If God behaves this way, how should you, the listener who identifies with this radical grace, actually live tomorrow morning? What does this mean for your Tuesday when you walk into your office or interact with your family?
It changes everything.
It does. Spurgeon doesn't just leave us with abstract theology. He outlines specific, stringent demands placed upon the chosen. If you have been drafted from the rubble, you have a responsibility. The first demand is a severe command to watch.
This is a crucial warning. If you have been pulled from the mire and set among the princes, you must never forget your natural state.
You cannot forget where you came from.
No. Spurgeon warns that if grace were to depart, the evil spirit would return, bringing 7 others worse than the first, and the last state would be worse than the first.
Right.
He is pulling from the words of Christ here.
Right. It is a direct reference.
The natural gravitational pull of the human heart is toward rebellion. It is not naturally inclined toward holiness. The only appropriate response to being given this high privilege is constant vigilance.
Right.
The command is repeated for maximum stress. Watch, watch, watch. What does this mean for the modern listener? It means that even if you have experienced massive growth, even if you are now a respected leader in your community, you cannot put it on cruise control.
You can't just coast.
No. You may be a holy vessel set apart for the altar, bringing prayers and praises, but you would revert to your former state instantly if grace did not prevent it. You are kept by divine strength, not your own willpower.
That vigilance leads directly to the second demand, a posture of humility. You have to remember where your promotion came from.
It is not a self-made success story.
Right. It doesn't come from the East or the West. It is a sheer gift. You are a blasphemer, a careless, godless person, and now you are raised to wait in the courts of heaven.
That should humble anyone.
It should. You must realize you are not worthy to lift your eyes to the place where his honor dwells. You are not worthy to have the Holy Spirit residing under your roof. Watching is best done in a lowly manner.
Absolutely.
If you are a modern professional who just got a massive promotion or achieved significant influence, and you start thinking you earned your spiritual spot through your own cleverness, you have completely lost the plot of the story.
You have missed the whole point.
Yeah. Arrogance is the antithesis of grace. You are a recipient of charity, a beggar who was given a feast, not a self-made spiritual giant.
Arrogance is entirely incompatible with the reality of this calling. If you truly grasp the magnitude of what you were saved from, it produces a specific reaction.
Right, a very loud reaction.
Yeah. Which leads to the third demand concerning the volume of gratitude. Spurgeon argues that extraordinary love ought to be the outgrowth of being an extraordinary sinner.
It makes sense.
He provides a fascinating anecdote about a man who lived across the river from him. Before his conversion, this man was known for swearing so loudly that everyone in the neighborhood could hear him.
Oh, wow. Just a nuisance to everyone.
Totally. When he was converted, his prayers actually troubled people in the church because they were so loud and disruptive.
That is amazing.
But Spurgeon understood the psychology perfectly. A man who has been loud for the devil cannot help being loud for Christ. He cannot just go through the motions of polite religion. He has to express his gratitude with the same volume he used to express his rebellion.
I resonate so much with that story. If you were aggressively public about your rebellion, how can you be quiet and timid about your rescue?
You can't.
Spurgeon connects this to the biblical story of the woman with the alabaster box. She was a woman with a known sinful reputation in the city.
A very public sinner.
Yeah. She walked into a room full of respectable religious leaders, brought her most precious possession, an extraordinarily expensive jar of perfume, and broke it over the head of Jesus. washing his feet with her tears and wiping them with her hair.
It was a very dramatic scene.
It was. She didn't offer a polite handshake. She offered a scandalous display of devotion because she knew the magnitude of her forgiveness.
Right.
What does an alabaster box level of gratitude look like in a 21st century context? It means your time, your finances, your reputation are entirely at his disposal.
Everything you have.
Yeah. If you have been pulled from the absolute bottom, your daily life should be marked by that same level of wholehearted, unapologetic intensity. You cannot afford to be cold or calculating with your devotion.
Finally, this calling demands unshakable confidence. This is where the theology of the text provides massive psychological security for the believer.
Security is so important here.
It is. Spurgeon uses an economic analogy to drive this home. Imagine a man who owed you £10,000, which, especially in the 19th century, was a staggering sum of money, a fortune.
Yeah. Alongside that massive debt, he owed you a trifling sum for a tiny promissory note, maybe a few pennies.
Okay. Two very different debts.
If you, as the creditor, forgave the £10,000 entirely, wiping the slate clean, the debtor would not worry for a single second about you suddenly dragging him to court over the little bill.
No, they wouldn't even think about it.
The major debt is cleared. The minor one is irrelevant in comparison.
That analogy provides such massive relief. Think about what that means for you, the listener.
It changes how you view your daily struggles.
If God reached down and pulled you from the miry clay, if he paid the massive, incalculable price of the blood of Christ to redeem you from your hostility and set your feet on a rock, you can trust him for the rest of your life.
Yes.
He didn't go to all this expense. He didn't orchestrate this massive cosmic intervention just to fling you away at the end over some minor stumble or daily failure.
That would make no sense. Right. If he found you as an enemy and made you a pardoned child, he will continue his work until he has perfected it. The little that remains to be sorted out, the daily struggles with sin and doubt, should cause no ultimate terror.
You can rest easy.
You can rest completely in the fact that he will finish what he started. He is not a fickle employer who fires people on a whim.
This entire analysis fundamentally alters how we view qualifications for spiritual work. We are forced to abandon our human metrics of respectability and merit.
Throw them completely out.
God's economy operates on the currency of grace, deliberately choosing the broken to shame the strong and the guilty to proclaim mercy.
It is a total reversal.
This ensures that the glory belongs entirely to the Creator, and it provides immense hope for anyone who feels too far gone to be useful. It destroys the idea that you have to clean yourself up before you can be drafted into service. The cleaning is part of the calling.
It is a massive shift in perspective. You look at the people around you and you realize you have no idea who God is preparing to use.
No idea at all.
We have covered the terrifying historical context of judgment in Jerusalem, the high and exclusive privileges of the priesthood, the baffling roster of rebels God has chosen throughout. Humility, gratitude, and confidence placed upon the chosen. It completely rewrites the script on who is qualified to work for God.
And that leaves us with a final thought drawn directly from Spurgeon's own extrapolations in the text. He prayed that God would pull leaders from the most unexpected places.
Where did he pray they would come from?
He prayed God would draft men from the fishermen in their boats, from the lowest dens of iniquity, from the saloons of frivolity where the wealthy waste their lives, and from the chambers of commerce where buyers and sellers make their cutthroat contracts. Think about your own city right now. Look at the people society currently considers the most hardened, unreachable, and corrupt. The people you walk past and write off as lost causes. According to the logic of this text, you might just be looking at the very people God is about to draft to be the greatest spiritual instructors of the next generation.
That is a staggering reality to walk away with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive on Reformed thinking. Think about that cracked canvas in the hands of the master artist, and we will see you next time.